Hey everybody, this is going to be a quick video. I hope that it's quick enough that it's not mind-numbingly boring, but a quick video on how to subnet, how to calculate subnets by hand like a boss. So there should be somewhere in the vicinity of this video an associated PDF where I really kind of have the steps of this procedure listed out in more detail. I have an example, and I also kind of have a description of why this procedure works in case that's interesting to anybody. If that's not interesting to you, then it's the kind of thing, this is the kind of thing where if you just know what the procedure is and you follow the procedure, you're going to be able to get the right answer. You're going to be able to calculate the right answer every time by hand like a boss. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Suppose that you are given an IP address of 100.42.127.139, and you're also told that it's on a /13 network. And then from there, you're asked to determine what the subnet address, the host range, and the broadcast address all are. So here's how you go about doing that. Just a side note, part of this is going to involve converting, being able to competently convert between decimal and binary. So if that's something that you're a little bit shaky on, you may want to go freshen up on that really quick before you jump into that, because I'm gonna do some conversions here, but I'm not gonna really walk through exactly what I'm doing, although you may kind of pick up what I'm doing anyways. So the first step in this procedure for subnetting by hand is to take your IP address and your mask and convert them into binary. So that's what I'm going to do right here. So 100 in binary is going to be 0, 1, 1, 96, 0, 96, 100. 0, 0, 42, 0, 128, 0, 64, 32, 0, 16, and 8 makes 40, and 42. 127 is kind of an easy one. I know that's going to be 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And then 139 is going to be 128, 0, 0, 0, 128, and 8 is 136, 0, 1, 1. So there is my my IP address in binary. Again, if you're not really clear on how to convert these, you may want to stop the video and go take a refresher on that again, because it's going to be kind of an important part of this procedure. The mask is easy because the /13 indicates there's just going to be the first 13 bits are ones. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and everything else is going to be zeros. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So once you've done that, once you've converted everything to binary, notice that I did my best to kind of line up my IP and my mask in binary, kind of the way that you would do as a kid when you're lining things up for addition or subtraction. Just keep all of the digits places as close to lined up as possible. And that's sort of important for this next step, which I call the logical and step. So the way that this works, again, in this video, I don't want to talk too much about why this works, or what it even is exactly that we're doing, but I'm going to write a couple notes here. So first I make this line, again, just like you did when you were a kid with addition and subtraction. And then I'm going to look at all of the columns that are created here, right? With these different bits that are all lined up. And I'm going to perform a calculation called the logical AND calculation. This is going to be really similar if you've ever worked with like truth tables, this is kind of a similar concept, okay? So up in the right-hand corner, or in the left-hand corner here, I'm gonna write out kind of the calculation that I'm doing. So I'm gonna look to see if I have a 1 and a 1 in both rows here. And if I do, I'm gonna create a third row and I'm gonna say 2 1s makes a 1. And then pretty much everything else, if it's got a 0 in it, that makes a 0, okay? Again, I know I'm not really explaining too in depth what this is. You can read about it in the PDF, assuming that it's somewhere available to you, and it should be. But basically the gist of it is if you have a 1 in both columns or in both rows of each column, like you do right here in this second bit, that's going to be a 1. Anything else is going to be a 0. So this is kind of like a calculation. So let me show you what I mean. So in this first bit here, I have a 0 and a 1, 0 and a 1, that makes a 0. Second bit, 1 and a 1, I'm going to say that makes a 1. Third bit, 1, 1, makes a 1, right? So pretty much anything that has a 0 in it is going to result in a 0. 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0. And I know that these last two octets are going to be all zeros because there's just zeros in the bottom here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So once I have calculated this, step 3, this is technically my subnet address, what I just calculated, right? So right there, this is the binary form of my subnet address. I'm going to go ahead and convert it to decimal right now, just because I know that I'm going to have to do that later on. I don't want to present my answers as binary. I want to present them as decimal. So to convert back, this should be a 100. I'm just going to verify. 64 and 32 is 96. 96 and 4 is 100. Okay. So the reason that I was pretty sure that was going to be 100, and again, this is something that will, as you go through this procedure a handful of times, you're going to start developing your own shortcuts and, you know, just kind of little hints and things like that. But this one is fairly easy because when you have all ones in an octet, that's kind of like a 255. So if you've seen like this mask in decimal would be 255 dot, what would this be? 255, 254, 252, 250. I may be doing my math there wrong. Anyway, whenever you have a 255, that octet just remains completely fixed. So since in the mask, since I have a 255 in this first octet in the mask, I know that the first octet for all of these IPs that I'm going to calculate is going to stay at 100. So there's no surprise that I'm getting a 100 right there. Okay. So then in this second octet, I have a 32 and an 8, so 40. And then these are going to be just zeros. So there it is. This is my subnet address in decimal form, 100.40.0.0. So now from here, we can begin to calculate out the host range and the broadcast address. So the way that we're going to do this is step 4. I want to determine the host portion. And specifically, I'm talking about here in the subnet address. So the next few steps, I'm specifically going to be working with the host portion of the subnet address. Okay, that's kind of important. So to determine the host portion, you look first at the mask, and anything that is a 0 in the mask is going to be the host portion, right? So anything after this 13th bit is no longer fixed. It's called the host portion, okay? So I'm going to make this same little line here in my subnet address. So I'll find the 13th bit, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I'm going to make that same line, and I'm just doing this so that I can keep track of the host portion of the subnet address for these next few steps. Okay. So once you've determined the host portion, which again is just from the 13th bit over, the fifth step is that we're going to calculate out the first host, the last host, and the broadcast address. Again, some of this may seem sort of obvious to you. You're going to develop shortcuts as you do this more. For the sake of being thorough and for the sake of rigor, I'm going to do kind of the long way of this. And until you get comfortable with doing the long way, I don't recommend trying to develop shortcuts unless they seem really intuitive to you. All right, so to calculate what the first host is, and I'm writing this out just so that it's sort of clear in the video. The first host, if I take my subnet address and in the host portion, I make all of host zeros except the last bit, which is going to be a 1. This is going to give me my first host, okay? So if I was to write this out, I know that, and I'm going to do something maybe that is a bit of a conversion sin, but I'm going to mix bases here, mostly for convenience. So I know that this first bit is going to stay the same, right? It's not part of the host portion. None of this octet is in the host portion. So this is just going to stay the same. So I already know that the first octet in my first host here is a 100. And now I'm going to look at the second octet. The last 3 bits of this second octet are part of the host portion. So I can't assume, I should say I don't want to assume that this is going to stay a 40. However, in this case, it is going to stay a 40 because what we're going to do is we're going to take all of the host portion, right? Recall this is the host portion, and I'm going to leave it all as zeros except for the very last bit. The very last bit, I'm going to make it a 1, okay? So just again, for the sake of being thorough and as clear as possible, I'm going to write these out in binary. So I know that the first 5 bits here is staying the same, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1. In this case, because I'm calculating out the first host, I'm going to leave all of the host portion is zeros except for the last bit, which is going to be a 1. So these last 3 bits in the second octet are still going to stay 0. The entire third octet is going to be zeros. And then the last octet is going to be all zeros except for the last bit. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the last bit is going to be a 1. Okay. So, and then this is my first host, right? It's kind of written a little bit funky because this is decimal. I realize now that maybe I should have picked something that wasn't 100. This is a decimal, just to be clear. This is not binary. This is a decimal. And then these ones are written in binary. So I'm going to rewrite this now in decimal just so that it's easier for me to write out later if I'm submitting answers or, whatever, because we want our IPs to be in decimal. So 100 dot, this is going to be 40 dot 0 dot 1. Okay, so here's my first host right here. And this makes a lot of sense. If you look at my subnet address, 100.40.0.0, the first host in a subnet is always going to be the very first IP after the subnet address. So that's sort of an easy way of calculating the first host rather than having to go through all of this. Again, don't use shortcuts unless they make a lot of sense to you. But it's no surprise that the first host is 100.40.0.1, just 1 IP above the subnet address. So the last host, I'm going to kind of do the inverse of what I did with the first host. I'm going to make all of the host portion 1s, except the last bit. which is going to be a 0. Okay, so we're kind of doing the inverse of what we did in this step. So how does that look? All right. Well, this first octet, once again, it remains fixed as a 100. The second octet, the first 5 bits remain fixed, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1. And then what I'm going to do, again, in the host portion, I'm going to make all of the host portion 1s except for the very last bit, which is a 0. So I'll just fill in the 1s here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then the last bit is a 0. Okay. So from here, if I switch this, I convert this back into decimal, I'll have a 100.47.255, because it's all 1s. That's an easy one. And then this one is all 1s except for the last one. So it's 254. So there's our last host. And then the very last thing, the broadcast, make all of host 1s. Okay, so very similar to these last few steps, but it's sort of a little bit easier because I'm just going to make all of this host portion here 1s. All right, so what's that going to look like? Again, the 100 remains fixed. I'm going to write this all out in binary. It may be already really obvious what this next IP is going to be, but again, for the sake of being rigorous, I'm going to write this all out in binary. 0, 0, 1, 0, 1. And then I make all of the host portion 1s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There is supposed to be another 1 in here. I don't think that changes this 47 at all. Sorry. So 1, 1, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if I convert this into decimal, it's 100 dot. Let me make sure that this is a 47. So it's a 32, 40, 44, 46, 47. Yeah, okay. Dot 255 dot 255. And again, if you kind of understand subnetting, this really shouldn't be any surprise that this is what our broadcast address is. The broadcast address is always going to be one IP higher than the last host. Okay, so sort of a shortcut that you may develop later on. It may be easier to calculate the subnet address and then calculate the broadcast address, because the last host is always one IP lower than the broadcast, and the first host is always one IP higher than the subnet address. So again, if that shortcut doesn't make sense to you or isn't intuitive, I don't recommend using it. But otherwise, that is one of the little shortcuts that you can do. So there we go. Here's our subnet address. We calculated out our subnet address. We calculated out our first host and our last host, which gives us the IP range, and the host IP range, and we calculated out the broadcast address. So that's the procedure. I want to do one more example here, just for the sake of, avoiding any kind of confusion or anything. So the next example, let's do 92.150.200.1. Say we're given that IP, and we're asked to calculate the subnet address, the broadcast, and the host range, given a mask of 255.240.0.0. Okay. So again, I'm going to go through this example a little bit more quickly, just because it's going to be the exact same procedure. So one, I'm going to convert everything to IP, convert everything to binary, convert my IP and my mask to binary. And I'm going to kind of line them up. So my IP, let's see, I need these numbers because this is what helps me to do the conversions in my head. I'm sure that there's a million different ways to do the conversions, but this is how I do it. So for 92, I need 0, 128. I'll take a 64. 32 is going to be too much. 64 and 16 is 80. 80 and 8 is 88. 88 and 4 is 92. 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. 150, 128, 0, 0. 128 and 16 is 144. 0, 148, 150. 200. 128 and 64 is 192. So now I just need an 8. 4, 2, 1. And then a 1. 1, 2, 3, 1. So there is my IP in binary. My mask, it's a 255 in this first octet, so that's just going to be all ones. There we go. 240, so 128, 192, 224, 240. Everything else just be zeros. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm not too worried about getting these last two octets lined up because it's just going to zero out. So next to my logical and, I'm going to put my little line here, just like I'm a kiddo. And I'm going to go on down from the left to the right on these columns of bits. 0 and 1 is a 0. 1 and 1, 1. 0 and 1 is a 0. 1, 1, 1, 0, 0. In the second octet, I've got a 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0. And then these are all just going to zero out. So I'm just going to write a big old 0 here rather than writing zeros 8 times. Okay, so this is my subnet address, right? So I'm going to convert it to decimal. This should still be 92. Let me verify. 64 and 16 is 80, 88, 92. Okay, we're on the right track. This is going to be a 128 plus a 16, so 144.0.0. So there's our subnet address. So next, determine the host portion. And again, I'm just going to come up here and write a line, make a line. So in this case, my host portion is everything that is after this 12th bit. So everything to the right of the 12th bit is my host portion. And remember, for this part, we want to be using the subnet address. Okay, so I just use the mask to determine which is the host portion of the subnet address. And then from here on out, these next few steps, I'm using this subnet address and paying attention to the host portion. So my first address is going to be a 92. That's going to stay fixed. The second one might change a bit. Actually, no, it's not. So it's going to be, also write it out in binary. 2, 3, 4. This one's still going to be all zeros. 5, 6, 7, 8. And this last one, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Right? So my first address is a 92.144.0.1. So that's what we expected, just one higher than the subnet. The last address is going to be a 92. And this time I'm going to write it all out in binary again because it is going to change. So the host port or the network portion stays the same, 1001. Now I'm going to fill everything else in with ones, except for the very last bit. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 0. Now I'll calculate this out in decimal. So it's going to be a 92, 128, and 16 is 144, 152, 156, 158, 159. Gosh, I really hope I'm doing my math right here. This is going to be a 255 and this a 254. And then the broadcast address, 92 dot. So the broadcast, again, it's just filling everything in with ones. So it's going to be the same as the last address, but with a 1 here. So I know that these are going to stay the same. 159, 255.255. Okay, so there we go again. So it went a little bit quicker this second time. So here's my subnet address, my first host, my last host. This defines your host range, by the way, and then my broadcast address. So that's how you do it. Subnetting by hand like a boss. I hope that this was really helpful for you. And I hope that you can get out there and really, impress people at parties with your subnetting skills. All right. Good luck, everybody. See ya.